So I got a couple quotes from you from your stories. I hope you don't mind if I put you on Twitter. But so what really resonated with me was when you said, I can't stand up unless you stand here with me, or you stand up with me. I can't remember your exact words, but that's so true, because there's so many things that I think each individual person in this room would really like to see happen in High River, but unless there is a joint effort, it's impossible to accomplish that alone, right? And so that's really what would be really nice to have come out of this year. More involvement, more people, right? Where'd she go? Oh, there she is, Josie.
Sister and I like to just because I called Terry out, so I better talk about it. She'll be your mom. We didn't bring her. As I said in the opening, that I was born in High River and I have grown up here my whole 45 years. I moved to the small hamlet of Cayley for about 2 months until I couldn't figure life out and had to move back home. I did a bit of a U-turn, yes. So what I love about this group of people is that I see so many faces that I see on a daily basis and have seen throughout growing up here. Parents of kids that I have gone to school with. Had a great chat with Terry, who I have a few stories of a few years back, and have recently just. He has come back into my circle, what I call my circle. He sits on a committee with my husband, who didn't grow up in High River. So I love that my community and my circle is growing, and I'm inviting more people into my circle and newer people. And I love how we have people that have just moved to High River and are here because they're concerned about and care about our community. And us lifers who are always here, and I, like my sister, have my hand in a lot of different pots, and we need to fill some of those pots. So that's why I'm here as well, is that I love my community. I grew up feeling safe here. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I feel confident that she is safe growing up in this community as well.
Thank you.
I'm her friend, and I also like to talk. I moved to High River just after the flood because of the feeling of community that I felt. I worked here before the flood. Felt the sense of community and moved down here afterwards. One of the reasons I'm here tonight is to hear ideas, like share ideas. Sometimes ideas are like harebrained and whatever. Like we had a meeting today where it was talked about. It doesn't matter what your ideas are. If you share them, things may happen. If you don't share them, they're not going to happen. So I'm here to hear other people's ideas and to see if we can stand together and make those ideas happen. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. I'm coming as a citizen of this High River. New citizen, I think, right? I'm a new resident. But I'm so happy to be here and be part of this community, because in these 8 years that I have been living here, for me living in Canada is like a dream come true. But the community inside the High River gave us too much to my family and myself. And I think it's time to start giving back, because probably if I've been living right now in my country, I will be a widow. And the opportunity to have my family together and have my husband alive is something that I can pay with nothing. Be part of this community give me, it's a big challenge, but give me the force inside my heart to do the best every day, to have a chance to improve every day, learn in so many ways, not only the language. I have to learn in too many things and struggle in too many things, but I'm standing here next to everybody because I'm part of this community and I want to build it together. I didn't grow up in this marvelous country, but now I'm here and I feel really one Canadian.
So I liked what you said in that, first of all, I don't want to mark the rest of my life by the flood, but we seem to keep coming back to this flood. But I like what you said that when the disaster happened in Japan, it gave a future that you never knew was going to be there. And I'm grateful for that. I think that this is a great time of opportunity for change, renewal, for seeing things that we might have dreamt of, but never really thought we could achieve. And now we've been given like a clean slate. We've received so much assistance financially through provincial governments and other agencies that this is just a huge opportunity for us to live our vision, to see our vision. And I think we have a lot of leaders in this room. And I really would encourage people, because there are a lot more leaders out here in our community, to invite them to whatever organization you're with or whatever opportunity there is so that we can expand that and we can make our committees, our groups, our organizations, and our communities stronger by using the leadership within our community. But I think there's so many that are back there that just don't quite put their foot forward and take that first step. So let's look for other leaders in the community that can come out and help.
Well, I'm an I-turn in the community, and I moved here in 2012, and I remember being at my first Rotary meeting, and I overheard a couple of local people saying, we were in the rebuilding stage, and we were talking about, well, it's okay, but we've lived here longer, and we should have a little more say. And I wish they would have said that, because that really pissed me off. One of the reasons that I moved to High River, because I used to live in Chesterfield, because I wanted to live in a community where I was part of the community, I just didn't live there. And tonight was refreshing when I started hearing people talking about change. The old place ain't coming back. And I hope that the people that have been here for a long time are going to allow, not me as a stranger, but as a resident, because I do want to see my community make a difference.
I've lived here since '73 and came to High River to raise our children so they could be independent and I didn't have to drive them everywhere. And I was one of those lazy mothers that didn't do that. But on the other hand, I had a chance to study and start teaching and involved in youth a lot right now. And being away twice a year to Europe really gives me a real light on what's going on, what's possible. And when you said that people don't see a future, there was a lot of work after the flood and it was invigorating because there had to be so much had to be done. And now all that energy needs to go somewhere. And I found coming back after the election, provincially and federally, this area isn't represented anywhere in power. That didn't help. And then the oil business didn't help. So it seemed like the lights had been turned off here in November. And we do have a lot of potential. And I think if we focus on people's creativity and initiatives and start with incubators, we saw that happening in the Dutch Design Week, where people that have creative ideas and have want to develop or have an invention, they come together and through an organized way of having an accountant, a marketing person, an investor, to promote that invention. And so bring it in the market and make that a success. And they have big conventions then where investors come and they, just like the Lions, what's the den called? Dragon's Den, but not that sappy, okay? It's real. So then these inventions and these individuals are eventually bought out, and they're happy about that because that gives them cash, and they reinvest in their peers that are also working on this level. And so it keeps rolling. It's beautiful. It's so inspiring. And so I wish you could watch these programs that we watch on the internet about building futures and about, they call it headlights, where different formats of working together are shown how people in the future are working. And I was just mentioning there the electric car and the automatic car. Can you imagine we have an automatic car? If you live in the country, you could stick your kids in it, program it, and you don't have to drive them anymore. And when I'm 75, I can hear and see. I can have a car and I can program it, I can get in there and I can go where I want. And I don't need a driver's license anymore. So those are all imaginable things that are great for us, right? So keep thinking creative and see how we can make this happen, okay?
First off, I want to say I can't believe you're sitting beside Ted and you said the lights went off in November. Oh my God.
I was trying to resist saying she just had to wait till the 1st of December.
But that just brings, what I wanted to say is there's a lot of people in this room that have taken steps to do things to create a better, more vibrant High River, and Ted's, George Lane Park, Christmas in George Lane Park is one of them. People are coming from all over. I had friends in Calgary, and their date night was to drive through the communities and see the Christmas lights, and they ended off doing the George Lane. And it's only going to grow and get better and make that whole weekend spectacular. And we really appreciate what you did and how hard you worked on that.
Hi. This is just for you to notice why I'm still talking about 8 years ago, because it's when I arrived. But 8 years ago, this town wasn't ready for me or us, the immigrant people. Family services didn't know what to do with us. I went to ask for help and they go, I don't know how to do it, let me see. That was town of High River. Library didn't know how to get me in Mango to learn English. Literacy for Life wasn't allowed to give me English classes because I was a visitor. So the town wasn't ready for people coming and live here from another country. But the town didn't close the doors. The town said, okay, people is coming, let's see what can we do. And Immigrant Services opened the office a little bit before I came. And then Family Services started doing taxes and workshops, and then finally say, okay, we need English classes. It works, see. But they must have kids, so we have to do something. And they take care of the kids. In the meantime, I was learning. It works. So it's just for you that having lived here this whole time, that born here, and that just notice the change. There were no Coke, there were no Tim Hortons. Now I don't know what to do without Tim Hortons. When I arrived, there were no handicals. There were piling was in the center street, and it was really close, really small. Now it's a big and lovely place to stay with my baby. So just for you to notice how it has changed, how it has grown, and if that happens 8 years ago, from now, this is amazing what is coming. Thank you.
part of the question is, how do we get more of this? How does High River continue to be a welcoming community? How does that, it's been really interesting for me in these last years, dancing with this word disaster. You know, like, I have absolutely no interest in being labeled as the disaster guy. They're important, but they're not where most of us want to live our lives. You know, they happen. They create this opening. They blow apart what we think. You know, one of the things that happens to most of us is we get locked in one way of looking at ourselves, looking at our community, and looking at our world. One of the things beyond the terror and the agony when a major disaster hits is it also just comes along and slaps us and says, that's just one way. And there's a lot of ways of seeing what's possible. Let's open up our eyes together. And comes back to that together again. But how do we do that? How do we create, you know, the kind of spaces that you're talking about in Europe? Actually, the whole Future Center movement in Japan was inspired by the Future Center movement from Europe. Started in the Netherlands. It's one of the first places that said, we need to create special places where we invent the new together. That it takes a certain discipline. It takes a certain commitment. It doesn't just happen overnight. We need to be able to come together, figure out what experiments we're going to be in. We need to engage in those experiments. By the way, most of the time when we engage in experiments, they don't work worth a damn. You know, they fall apart. They're supposed to, because we don't know what we're doing. And the way that we discover what we're doing is by doing it, learning from it, doing it again, learning from it, doing it again, learning from it, and eventually figuring out how to do it well. But we don't start out knowing how to do it well. So the question is, how do we construct those spaces that allow us to be experimental with each other? Earlier last year, somebody told me one of the sayings that's up on the wall. And that was that, by the way, success is not a reward and failure is not a punishment. You know, at some levels, it doesn't matter what happens. What's important is that we go ahead and we try something and we stay present to what's going on enough to notice what happened, decide what it is that we like about it, and decide what we're going to do next. What are the structures in community? What are the structures in High River that support us in doing that? That's one of the questions that we're working with over this next couple of days. For me, this last arc of time in Japan has been, it's been really incredible. It's been such a deep teacher. One of the most important lessons has been around intention and surrender. So as I mentioned, 2 or 3 weeks after the disasters, I was on an airplane headed back to Japan because I had this idea that future centers, like the ones from Europe, could be a way that would help people in the disaster area come together, define what it was they wanted to happen, and then start working on it. Good idea. How the hell does that happen? How do I, as one person showing up from the outside, actually invite anything new forward? And were times when I went absolutely crazy. It was really hard. And part of what I finally realized was that intention, having clarity of intention around what we want to happen, is really important. And then being able to surrender is just as important. Being able to surrender to what's going on. And when I first started thinking about this, it put me into okay, Bob, what's the difference between surrender and giving up? Interesting question. It took me I'm not very fast. So it took me 2 years to actually get to a starting point in terms of that question. And what I realized was that surrender is actually showing up, not giving up. That surrender is being willing to show up to what's actually going on, to be able to look at it and to notice it and to say, how does that inform what the next steps that I am going to take are? Giving up is just walking away from it. Giving up is throwing up your hands and saying, can't do it, too hard, not interested enough, gonna let it go, which is smart sometimes. Not saying that giving up is a bad idea. I'm saying it's really different than showing up. So this dance of intention and surrender is one of the dances, if we're going to create anything new, that I think we have to be in. Part of what we have to do is we have to keep connecting with each other. We have to, it does go back to the standing up and standing together. But it's critical and it's fundamental. We need each other if we're going to do anything significant. And we need to be doing things that we care about. I was with a group of and I'll call them activists for lack of a better term, group of people that have dedicated their lives to rebuilding Fukushima. And we were having a retreat a couple months ago now. And there was one guy, and first of all, it blew my mind when he said he'd been in high school at the time of the disasters. We forget how quickly time goes on. And he graduated from college, like the year before. And he said, I want to help. I want to help communities in Fukushima. And he became part of this program. And he went to a small town in Fukushima. And he'd come and he'd go to people in town and he'd say, "Hi, I'm here to help." And they'd say to him, "Glad you're here. Thank you for showing up. Figure out what you're supposed to do." But don't you understand? I'm here to help. Thank you for showing up. We're glad you're here. Figure out what you're supposed to do. And it almost drove him crazy. He'd just come off 4 years of college where somebody was telling him what to do all the time. And now he was in this community that he wanted to help in, and people were saying, "Glad you're here. Figure out what you're supposed to do." It took him like 3 or 4 months before what he started to see was that he had to figure out what was important to him. He had to figure out what was actually going to bring him enough joy and enough satisfaction that it was worth getting up in the morning and doing. Because no one was going to tell him what to do. He had to discover it himself. He had to discover where he was going to start, and then he could start inviting people in. This young man his comments became the focus of our whole weekend together. And, I don't know what your levels of exhaustion are in High River, but the levels of exhaustion in the northeast part of Japan are pretty darn high. And this group of people who have dedicated their lives and are there for the long term, what they started saying this weekend was, if we get honest with each other, what we're going to do is we're going to do the things that really bring us joy. If we're going to be in this work for the long term, we're not going to do stuff that's not important. The stuff that we do has to be stuff that's really important to us, that brings us some satisfaction in our lives. And we're going to use that as our compass for going forward. To me, this is one of these really important points. And it is working with this energy of co-creation. It's saying we need to come together and do what's important to us, and we need to do it now. And it's, somebody mentioned, starting earlier, somebody talked about the 5 areas that were defined maybe in 2014, 5 areas to work on. When that can happen, it's good. One of the challenges is that we often end up defining these sort of global aspirations and global projects that, if we're honest, most of us don't care about that much. And then we get frustrated because not very much happens. Comes back to the question of what do we really care about that we're going to go ahead and do. How are we going to work with the energy of community and move community forward? We've started talking about how there's 4 important stages. There's, first of all, being able and willing to name what it is that we care about and that we're going to work on. There's, second, beginning to connect and bring together in relationship the people that share that same caring, because we've got to do it together. There's, third, the figuring out what we need to do to nourish people with resources to be able to do that work. Sometimes that's some skill building, sometimes that's financial resources, sometimes that's other resources from the community, but we nourish that thing that wants to begin. And then the last one is that we have to illuminate what's going on. We have to tell the story. We have to stop doing the work that we're doing as if it's the best kept secret in town. Okay? It's one of the things that happens. We get too small. And these dreams that we have, they're big. We've got to illuminate them. We've got to share them with each other. So one of the things we talk about is we talk about name, connect, nourish, and illuminate. It's important to know, it's important to have an overall sense of direction. Some of my friends in Japan talk about it as the North Star or the Polar Star. We have to have a sense of where it is that we're trying to move and what's important to us. But then we've got to be willing to be experimental in terms of how we move forward. And we have to keep coming back. We need to keep coming back to each other. What I get as I listen to you is that you're in this really precious time now. You know, what my dear new friend Rex, close, Reg. And I got 2 out of 3, that's not bad. You know, what he said about, we're not going back. The old High River is gone. The question is, what wants to be created now? Where are you going to go with it? How are you going to get there? This really is the beginning of a long road. And it's the road that we're going to be on for the rest of our lives. As far as I can tell, we're in a time of extraordinary change. And we got some choices here. We can either get afraid, and when we get afraid, we can get isolated. We can kind of shut down. We can find some place to retreat to. Or we can go ahead, full steam ahead. And we can be with each other, connect with each other, and start to do what we want. In order to do that, we need to create new structures of community. We need to create a rhythm that allows us, supports us in coming together on a frequent basis for things that we care about. We need to find ways to join with people who want the same things and want them now, so that we can go ahead and make them happen. And we have to do that within the larger ecosystem of community as a whole. That's how change happens. Change happens when we're willing to step forward and take responsibility for what we see. We do that in relationship with the conventional structures of power. Government is really good at doing things like keeping garbage picked up, keeping the streets plowed, keeping the electricity running. Where we got this idea that government was supposed to be creative and innovative and provide leadership for change, I don't know. It doesn't happen. That is not the role of government. We're the ones that have to make the changes that we want. Government comes in behind. Government comes in and says, well, you know, we weren't in favor of that to begin with, but now that you've gone out and shown us how to do it and shown us that it can make a difference, we'll support that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your leadership in starting something. We can follow along. We can keep it going. But it's people like all of you in this room that have to take the initiative for change. You're the ones that are responsible. I think that's what we're seeing all over the world. You know, when I left the nonprofit that I worked with for 25 years, we were getting all sorts of recognition for the creative and innovative and wonderful work we were doing, and that was nice. But I couldn't help but notice that we were doing a lot of work to support people whose lives were at the economic margins of community. And it felt like what we were doing was putting our fingers in holes in the dike. And there just kept being more holes. My question that I left with was, what makes enough of a difference to make a difference? What is it that shifts the dynamic in community in a way that allows us to build healthy, resilient, thriving communities for all? And I wasn't seeing that in my work. I was seeing us doing a lot of good stuff, but we weren't changing the underlying nature of community in a way that was making it possible for many people to live really good lives. And I had to go out into the world to see how it was being done elsewhere. That was the great teaching of the work in South Africa and Zimbabwe. I remember one time, 2008, I don't know, this is old news now, but some of you may remember that from the early part of this century, in the early part of this century, Zimbabwe, which had been the breadbasket of Southern Africa, started to fall apart. Things were going on there, and it went south, literally, figuratively, very, very quickly. It was a very hard time. In some ways, it was my first major disaster. We did a regional gathering of people from Southern Africa to talk about what they were doing for community building. I got there a day late. And I remember coming in and seeing this group of people from Johannesburg who basically, they're just kind of like this. So you got to understand, Johannesburg, South Africa, it's got kind of the top of the walk. We're really cool. We're the best people on the planet. We know how to do everything. We're great. And the people who came were saying, and we're being really edgy. We're going into Zimbabwe, and we all know how bad Zimbabwe is. And they got there, and what they encountered were a group of people who were just getting up in the morning, trying to figure out what they were going to do to make the day work. They weren't complaining, they weren't whining, they were just figuring out how to go ahead. They were figuring out what they needed to do. That's the power of community. That's what we're inviting in now. And I think that's enough for tonight. I want to leave some space now for, first of all, just for any other final comments from anyone here. Then I'm going to turn it back to Jody, who's going to talk a bit about what we're doing in the next 2 days. And then we're going to thank you for coming. So, what else? What else?
I love your words about the fact that we are responsible to create the quality of our community when we cannot rely on government. And the flood was a huge blessing for us to have that reset button. And none of us want to define ourselves by the flood anymore. I think, for me, what I see on the horizon are the difficulties that my community is going to face because of economic change that is taking place provincially, nationally, and globally. We can't say that the government needs to change this for us. We have to find a way to create a vibrant community where we all have what we need. I feel really passionate about this, and I really, really resound with your wisdom. Thank you very much.
I just wanted, I'm sure I'm expressing most people's thoughts here tonight. This is a pretty impressive gathering, and I think a lot of very positive and inspirational ideas are coming forward here. One of the things that really struck me with a couple of our earlier speakers is who are here from outside of Canada, is what a luxury it is that we are living in a part of the world where we can even discuss having a future. That's not true in all parts of the world. So I just think that that was bringing forward a really interesting perspective, the gratitude that we are where we are, and the luxury to even have this kind of conversation.
There's people in the back. There's a growing number back there.
I'd just like to say I was so
yeah, you took my job. I love my job. No, when I saw that the Jody on the and Kristen was sharing with me about this program, I got so excited about coming here. And you know what? Myself and Maureen, we volunteer with Youth Justice. And tonight we have a panel with Youth Justice. And I'm sort of torn because I see the future in the youth here in town. And but I knew that this was the place to come tonight. And I just want to just thank you for putting this on, organizing it, and I've been